Now, that was the Ernst & Young pitching, and that was for regional startups down there. So Michelle, I'll just start with you first. From where you sit, what does that opportunity afford your organisation to be able to do that in that space without all the sort of hype about Sydney and etc.? But, I mean, beyond that, is there a real value in doing that and going down there?
Absolutely. I mean, firstly, in terms of the opportunity being exposed to attending the event, we have to say a huge thank you to Pierre Gordon and the team from the Business Centre for including us in the event last week. Just to be a part of the group of startups and understanding the challenges that we're all facing together, and just collaborating and sharing ideas and sharing the pain points and sharing all the different experiences that we're going through was a terrific chance for us to kind of validate that we are on the right track and we are doing things the right way, and sometimes we will make mistakes, but it's all about learning and moving on from that. So, to be exposed, I guess, in that forum, but also to be exposed in the Ernst & Young pitch session was incredible. Just to have that experience of being in a room presenting to sophisticated investors and VCs when we're still so early on in our stage of the business was terrific.
We heard that you had quite a successful session down there. The founder of your app, Jessica, I hear, is also on a cool tech show this evening. Can you tell us about that?
She sure is. She really, really, really wanted to be here, but surprise to Jess and myself on the Ernst & Young pitch night last Tuesday was Catherine from In Her Pursuit, who is a passionate advocate for female founders in the tech startup space, and she surprised Jess to appear live on a panel of Sky News tonight on the Entrepreneur Show. So Jess is in Sydney at the moment as we speak on the show.
Congratulations.
Doing Sky
Thank
News.
you.
Well, hey, look, you're holding up the other side, It's
I am.
Two pillars.
That's right.
Two pillars.
It's a team effort.
So Michelle, Crave, we've seen what appears to be a food app, but what is Crave?
Yes, so Crave was developed in August last year by Jess, the founder and the agency director. A bit of background, Crave is a social media marketing agency based in Newcastle, and we specialise in the hospitality industry. So our team have lots of experience in dealing with restaurants and cafe owners, and we understand the challenges that they have in marketing their business, and obviously the budgets and the constraints around time and obviously knowledge in the marketing space. So hence the Crave app was born, which is it's a visual dish-based discovery tool where people can personalise their filters based on where they are in terms of location, price, dietary requirements and different times of meal types, so breakfast, lunch and dinner. And basically images of food comes up on their screen, a little bit like Tinder for food, swiping left and right on the concept of the app. And if you like what you see, you click through and that takes you through to where the dish is from, how close it is to you, and then the consumer can obviously act on that based on the visual view of food. And we also have thousands of offers on there as well, so people can save lots of money when they're travelling not only locally but as a tourist as well. Yeah.
So it's a bit like the entertainment book to some extent.
Yes,
and
yeah.
sort of taking that but into a digital space.
Absolutely, and more visual. So visual is crucial. It's all about the food. So from a business's point of view, the chefs love it because they get to showcase the valuable and amazing creations that they present in their dishes and their food. So from a business's point of view, it allows them to showcase what they present on the plate rather than reviews and a description based on the business.
So you guys just launched in 2017, so you're quite young as a business, but you're getting quite good traction. Can you just tell us about starting up and the kind of, again, the journey that you've got to now, anything that you've learnt along the way?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I joined the team at the end of last year. As I mentioned, Jess is the founder and the brains behind the app. The app was actually developed, it's a very, very family-based business, so the app was actually developed by Jess's brother, which obviously allowed us to be able to develop at a much cheaper price than it would be as a normal app development cost. And it allows us to make changes a lot quicker and a lot more fluidly because we have access to tech very quickly. So I came on board at the end of last year, and it's really interesting because my background is working with restaurants and cafes with the industry advocate, restaurant and catering, and a background of hotels, restaurants and marketing side of things. So to come into a startup was a real interesting eye-opener for me to see the different challenges that startups face. You're doing everything with not much money at all, so you're an expert in HR, finance, sales, marketing and everything. So it's a real collaborative approach. It's a real all hands on deck, and I think it's really important. I know everyone keeps saying the team is really crucial. If you like what you're doing, if you love the people you're working with and you're passionate about the idea, the sky's the limit.
So which is probably a good point to bring Peter in, because your long experience being an entrepreneur, but also dealing in the area of environmental engineering, so forth. But at the same time, the whole startup environment, what's that been like for you in that respect?
It's actually been an interesting transition. I started up my first company probably 25 years ago when startup didn't exist, or the term didn't exist. The transition into the startup we have now has basically occurred over the last 8 years or thereabouts. We started solving problems in environmental space that were big data problems, things like flood modelling, where it was far too complex for people to look at. And we worked out that if we're going to do this properly, it needs to be done much more efficiently than the way it's been going forward. And so it's been a bit of a transition. I'm an engineer and I'm a dot joiner more than anything else. I see how things fit together. But I have a lot of really smart people that work with me that help us actually put that into a smooth space. And if I had to explain what we do, it's a little bit like, I'll use oil as a bit of an analogy in this space. So Peter Sondergaard from Gartner last year basically said that data is the oil of the future. In actual fact, data is the energy of the future. And our job is to take that raw data, a bit like oil, find it in the first place, then curate it, actually get it clean, refine it, and then produce some really high quality products from it. But that's where the analogy with oil stops, because our next job then is to serve it as lightly as we can straight to a user, their car, or directly into the engine that's driving them, i.e. their business going forward. And that's basically what we're working on doing, if that's not too complex.
No, that's beautifully explained. Thank you. No, you were involved in Startup Express last week. You're quite experienced in the industry, so how did you find the experience of being in that program?
Yeah, that was quite interesting. The Ernst Young pitch was even more interesting in that space. We've done one-on-one pitches many times over the last X number of years. But to pitch to a group that you don't know who they are, there's 100-odd people there that are interested, but at what level do they understand? It becomes really quite challenging and interesting in that space. What we have to pitch is not what we call simple in that space, so trying to put it across in a way was a real challenge. We spent a long time thinking about it, and I think for me, the major learning out of all that was actually the thought and the clarity we got in coming to terms with what we were going to try and deliver in that pitch space. But it's quite interesting trying to put it into a 6.5 minute time frame.
But that can only help you market your product better by refining it down to its most simplest piece of, elocution for the general user. That can only be of benefit to you.
Absolutely. So at work, each week or each fortnight, we run a lean and agile process, and each fortnight we catch up on what worked and what didn't in the last week. And this week we actually scored how we thought the last 2 weeks were. I actually gave it a 9. Half the week I was in bed with the flu because I was as sick as a dog when I was delivering this presentation down at Ernst Young. But the 9 was because we got so much clarity out of our process that it was probably the most productive fortnight that I've had in a long time in that space. And it was the pressure of the pitch or the getting it to that state that really helped us get to that point. We've worked in probably 30 different market verticals. We've provided solutions, apart from the environmental stuff, in all sorts of areas that need scalable solutions that are a bit bespoke or a bit whatever else. We now serve up information to solar industry guys, and we serve it up to property industry. We worked out the other day we're saving one of our clients about $500,000 a year because we're providing the information they need directly in front of them rather than them having to go to find it in that space. So it's been quite an experience, yes.
So explain to us exactly what it is that Anditi does. You've just saved someone $500,000. I'm interested to know. Can it help me?
Okay, so we work with, this is, and I'm going to try and make it as simple as I possibly can. We work with spatial data, spatial information. So if you think about Google and you look at Google Earth and you look at the images that are there, that information contains a lot more than just what you see with your eye. And you can start to drill down into that information and find out where there are curbs and where there are different species in that space, etc. And we can actually pull that out. We combine that with those images with a thing called LiDAR. So when a policeman picks you up for travelling too fast, he shot a laser beam at you. He can work out exactly where you are in space. We can do the same with aircraft, helicopters, satellites, other bits and pieces, and work out exactly what something looks like. We then start to build analytics on all that. We start to analyse that data. So the building guys that we save about $500,000 a year for, they used to drive to site to look at what the neighbours' houses looked like, to look at where the trees were, to find out where the fire hydrants were, to find roof pitches and all those things. We just serve that up to them on their computer screen because we can analyse it to that level. Okay.
So, mindful of your background, many years of entrepreneurial spirit, what of that experience has supported you in terms of moving to this next stage with the startup and then scaling up?
Look,
if at all.
No, lots. So I spent the last 25 years or thereabouts working with clients and the community, trying to make the most out of the resources we have to fire the community we live in, all right? And we've done a lot of work in that space, but the realities come, or understandings come that it's not just the resources. We need to think about how we use them in a much more clever way going forward. And I can give you a few examples in that space. If you go back to a Cobb & Co coach back in the turn of the century, you'd use 6 horses and probably 4 weeks to take 20 kilos of letters or 200 kilos of letters and 4 people to Armidale, say, all right? You'd use about 800 kilowatt hours of power. You'd generate about 800 kilograms of CO2, of gas. Nowadays, the next transition from that was technology, fossil fuel cars. You cut the travel time down to 4 hours, you cut the greenhouse gas emission down to about half, and you cut the energy consumption down to about a quarter of what was used otherwise. Nowadays, using technology, data, we press a button, an email gets sent or a PDF gets sent or something else, does all that information. Doesn't necessarily transfer the people, but it transfers the information across, going through it. And that is sort of the analogy that we're seeing we have to do. At this point in time, we're about 7 times over the global renewable footprint of energy usage. If we don't get smarter about how we use what we've got, then we're just not going to be here. And that's what it's about.
Wow, that's really amazing. So you're basically gathering data from everything, you know, like in order to refine the process on how to work with it and in multiple industries.
Yeah, so 25 years of doing environmental consulting covered a lot of ground. And we have a good understanding. I've worked with other people in that space. One of the guys, our head of technology, has been with me 20 years, basically. So we understand what the information needs to look like. We'll go and look and find that information and make sure it's fit for purpose, as we say. It's the right resolution, right quality, etc., etc. And then we'll analyse it to produce the results that we need. So, yes, it's...
Oh, that's really great.
Yeah.
Michelle, I'd like to just step back and talk about the Startup Express. And Peter just said that it helped him a lot in the articulation of what it is that his company is doing. Did that process also work for you? Did you receive any extra benefits that you weren't expecting?
Absolutely. I think it's just the exercise of, you know the product so well, you know it inside out, but how can you communicate that not just by words but also by feeling as well, and to have people really understand and be engaged and feel like they're living it with you. So Jess and I practiced the pitch over many hours, and we refined it over 3 or 4, 5, 6 different times in different formats. So it really, I think, it just makes you sort of step back and have a look at the way you're doing business. And even from this process, it allowed us to look at our pricing model and where we're going to move in the next phase and how we plan to scale up and what that looks like. Mm-hmm. So just really taking a step back, and you're so entrenched in the day-to-day that you don't have much time to really think about the long-term strategy, even though you know where you want to go. It's just taking a step back and working through and getting feedback from a lot of different stakeholders and people involved. Yeah.
Peter, I believe there's some great work that you're doing overseas, South Africa,
Central America.
Central America. Yeah.
You want to hear that story?
Well, just because prior to coming on, we were listening to some people talking about that. So I'd be very interested to hear what's going on there.
So one of the things we do is a lot of work with LiDAR, which is this laser beam stuff. And we've written our own classification system for it. It's probably one of the best ones in the world that we're sort of using going through that space. We got approached by a company out of Western Australia who had a project in Central America. And there's a major infrastructure project being built there. It's about 5,500 kilometres squared, mostly of dense forest, but lots of houses through the area, lots of people, lots of drainage lines and all that sort of stuff. They'd engaged an American firm to capture LiDAR over the whole site so they could build what we call a digital terrain model, a surface of the Earth in that space, and work out what height it was and put contours on it and all that stuff. And then also to be able to pull out where there were buildings and drainage lines from that. Now, it turns out that that American company had one or two challenges while they were there, because the planes that they were using to capture the LiDAR were pretty much the same size as ones that carry other white stuff like cocaine. And one of them landed one day with a few bullet holes in it. And so they weren't so keen to go back again after that. They also found that when they were we put control points down on the ground so that we can measure and relate everything back to those control points. But the surveyors are being faced by guerrillas, not guerrillas with hairiness, but the guerrillas with submachine guns. And they lost some of their equipment, etc. So they ended up delivering the data to our clients and saying, that's it. And they wouldn't give them the raw data or anything else, that's it. So our client has spent $1.5 million collecting this data for no result. Or the result they got was a mess, they couldn't use it. So we, with our system, the way it's been set up, went back to the sort of fundamentals of the data capture. So an aeroplane flies across, it has time. It's shooting things at an angle. We can work out from time and an angle where it should have hit on the ground. And then we can actually start to piece together all that information. So there was about 50 billion of these points shot down that we had to go back and realign and resort and work through and then recollate the whole thing. And then when we got the data, there were some errors in the data itself. So normally an error bar in the data we're working with might be only about 200 mils or so. In this stuff it was more like 600 to 800 millimetres. And so trying to find a plane or a roof for a building became impossible. So we had to rewrite our code that we developed over 6 or 7 years specifically for this data to try and find the roofs that were out there. And then we basically sat down and generated all that information, put it all back together and delivered it back to the client. We didn't get 1.5 million, unfortunately, but we got a very happy client.
But wouldn't you just go to Google Maps and bring that up? Sorry, it's being facetious.
No, it's a very valid question, because what's the difference between us and Google Maps? All right? Google Maps, you can see something. It looks like it's a building in 3D. It looks like it's real. But that's about where it ends, okay? We can tell you precisely where the gutter, the roof pitch, the tower on the top of it is, and we can tell you when they put imagery together, you never know whether it's actually in the right spot or not. But when you put imagery and LiDAR together, you very rapidly work out that they're mismatched by some metres. And one of our clients was telling us that they were achieving 200 millimetres horizontal alignment with their imagery. It was very good.
Wow.
We found out it was a long way short of that, and we just produced some imagery back to them and showed them exactly that's where it's at. So the difference is we can interrogate our stuff and tell you all sorts of more information.
So in the remaining couple of minutes we have, I'd just like to get some feedback from both of you briefly. What have you gained out of being a part of the Express, and where do you go from here? So Michelle.
Well, I guess firstly, I'd call it great friends. You know, we've made some amazing connections in the last week that has been invaluable to our business. Just even to be aware of the resource of the business centre, to be able to have access to, financial experts, legal experts. We're basically bootstrapping the business at the moment, so we don't have much money to spend. So I think that the whole exercise for us has been a terrific chance to take a step back in the whole scheme of things and really work out where we want to go and how we're going to get there, and push ourselves to set some really critical deadlines to launch into particularly the metro areas within the next sort of 6 to 12 months.
Peter?
part of it's the support, and we moved into 1804 to be part of a community and to help Newcastle grow. I've said this a couple of times before, but Newcastle really amazes me about the collaborative effort, the community, the sense of community that's here, and I think it's a great place to be part of going forward into the future. And that was the Ernst Young and the Siebert sort of visit was just one more trip on that journey. But yeah, it's about getting good camaraderie, sorry, and yeah, good exposure.
Well, look, I'd like a round of applause to our two guests, Michelle and Peter. Thanks for joining us up here. Fascinating. Really appreciate it. Time. Thank you. So we're here from the Foghorn, episode 13, Lunaticks Live, and we've got a couple of things we'd like to know everyone about. We've got the Newey Awards.
Yes, the Newey Awards are on in September on the 27th, which is very exciting. It's our big event of the year. And entries close on the 17th of August. So get your entries in and let's have a really great, successful night on the 27th of September.
And of course, the first round of judging will be the 24th of August. Fitness, the finalists will be announced on the 7th of September. And then the actual award ceremony, 27th September, here at the Foghorn Brewhouse here on Newcastle, in Newcastle on King Street.
Will you be here, Greg?
I definitely will. Will you, Olivia?
Oh, I think I might come.
Absolutely.
Sounds wonderful.
So, to all of our crew, thank you very much for a fantastic audience here. To our wonderful panellists and guests who joined us up here, Lunaticks Live, episode 13, Start Up and Scaling Up.
Thank you
very
so
much
much.
for joining it, and bye-bye for now.
Good night.